I really liked the movie, and what surprised me was the kind of emotional journey we go on. I didn't really expect that from the film, and grief is
Mm.
very much at the forefront of this story. Ben and Travis are really grappling with that throughout, and it really builds to this really strong moment near the end emotionally. Can you just speak to that element of grief and,
Mm.
giving this a very serious and universal theme to this movie that's very spooky and very fun for the family, but, there is that meaningful impact.
Yeah, that meaningful impact is sort of why I said yes to the project. It's always the thing I feel first in the screenplay. It's always the thing that kind of activates me the most as a director. And I recognize myself in the lead, in the title, in the main character, Ben. He's this kind of jaded guy, this jaded introvert that really has a real people limit, especially out there in the world, suspicious of children and suspicious of charismatic people. I identify with that. But underneath all of that is a guy who is, there's a lot of grief there to process. And I also identified with that. And what I thought was so beautiful is that the answer for Ben was for him to kind of befriend and be a father figure to a little kid who lost his father. I'm also that little kid. I lost my dad at 6. And I think something was probably, I'm not a licensed therapist, but I've been to therapy a lot. And I think probably what was happening inside of my mind is that my adult self and my kid self were meeting up and talking and getting to know each other in a real sense, through this movie. And so that really was the thing that got me excited in the first place, that there's this story of grief and sort of found family, upon which everything else was sort of hanging on. That was really my through line in the movie. And I think getting to kind of even just in a fantasy way, sort of work out like, wow, what if I had a Ben growing up, or if I had a Travis now, what would that do? What would that do for me? How would that change me? Allow me to move through some difficult things?
And you couldn't ask for a better lead than Lakeith, and he's just so great because, like you mentioned, that he's very funny during like the antisocial parts. He's able to carry the like emotional core of the film. He's such a versatile actor. Can you
Yeah.
speak to, him getting to show off all those different shades to the character? Because we get to see his comedy, we get to see, drama, emotion. We kind of get to see it all from him.
Yeah, he's a leading man. He's such a star, and I was so excited. I love that. I love that. I love a casting choice that is just so obviously perfect, but we just haven't seen that person like that before. I think Dear White People got me addicted to that kind of casting because, Tyler James Williams and Tessa Thompson and Tiana Paris, these are people who had roles and stuff before you, but you just never really saw them in this particular context, particularly Tessa and Tyler, who were child stars, and I don't know what that is. I just love that. I love the surprise of that. And when you meet Lakeith, it's so obvious he's a leading man. I mean, he has that Johnny Depp thing where he's like weird and interesting and intriguing and mysterious, but at the same time, he's super calm and vulnerable and lets you in emotionally and what's happening to him, no matter what's happening, on the outside, whatever he's saying, you can feel it in the eyes. And I don't know, it was almost like, wow, I can't believe no one's done this already. Like, great, I get to be the one to introduce him in this way. And he just couldn't have been a better partner for this film. I really wonderful guy and wonderful actor. It was just really a wonderful experience with him.
You mentioned the found family aspect, and you have such a great ensemble cast, but I have to ask specifically about Danny DeVito. That had to be such a
Yeah, the
thrill
goat.
working with him. He's such a legend. What stood out about, getting to see his comedy chops in person as a director? Because you can't ask for better than that.
Well, he is a director. He's a storyteller. I think that's what's everyone had this aspect of them, but Danny in particular, where he really understands how what he is doing supports a greater story, a greater narrative. He's a very generous actor that way. And he's just the coolest person to be around. I mean, honestly, he's one of those people where like you just feel great being around him, and he's so funny and he's super naughty and so delightful. And he would just sort of hang out in between scenes, like whether he was shooting or not, he would just be on an Apple box and we'd just be shooting it, and talking and trading stories. And it was really nice to kind of have that kind of like big brother kind of energy, because he had been there. He's, helmed big studio pictures before and figured out like how to find your way in. And I cannot speak highly enough. We still keep in touch. I love him. I love his family, and just really can't ask for a better guy, really.
That's awesome. And speaking of like the comedy side, Owen Wilson just so funny
Yeah.
throughout this, and just a constant highlight. His timing is just second to none. What really stood out about seeing him, get to show off his comedy chops here?
He's a consummate professional. He feels so easy on camera, and off camera he is so dedicated, man. It's crazy. He's like a great mix of the things that you want in an actor, and that I kind of think of in myself too. It's like, and maybe this is because we're both from Texas. That might be part of it. I'm not sure, but he can get really, really intense and really, really hyper focused and wanting to get it right. But at the same time, he knows how to have fun. And in between takes, he's on a bike, kind of sightseeing, or like he's both chill and intense, and it's a nice balance. And he takes what he does very seriously, and like you said, nobody does it better. It's like it's like watching a magic trick. What he does with dialogue and how he translates kind of what might otherwise be quite generic, and make it sort of alive and idiosyncratic. It was a miracle kind of watching it happen. And I just felt so lucky, so lucky to be a part of it.
And then, I could go through the whole cast. It's such a great ensemble. How is it kind of balancing? Because every single character has like a little layer to them. Like when we learn about Owen Wilson's characters, his past, and why he like has the get up on that he does. They all have those interesting layers to them. How is it making sure everybody kind of had their character moments? Because you do have such a cast. It'd be very easy to just focus on one or two standout performances, but everybody gets their time, and has moments for the audience to really attach to them.
I mean, that's the game. That's the whole fun of it, And going into this, like I thought about and talked a lot about Clue, and I talked a lot about Ghostbusters, and that's how those movies work. My first movie is an ensemble multi-protagonist film, and certainly my series was. And I those always just appealed to me. Like I grew up watching Star Trek, and there's a captain, but then within that bigger ensemble, you get to figure out who you are, and how you would interact and like who you relate to. Same thing with like the X-Men comics I would read growing up. It's just sort of, I'm just attracted to that. I don't know. It's like I can't quite find myself in just one character. I need a few different ones interacting before I can really start to feel like I know who I am in the story. So for me, that came pretty naturally. And I know that, Katie Dipple, who wrote the screenplay, certainly had that in mind. And especially when you start casting these really big actors in each role, you want to give them something to do. And if they don't have an arc and they don't have subtext, they don't have layers, well, what's the fun in that? So yeah, I think that's where it comes from. It's a pleasure to watch and make those kinds of stories.
There's a really fun cameo with Winona Ryder. How did that all come about?
Well, because the screenplay was so funny, and because the cast was already so exciting, we just kind of went for broke. And it was like, even for these little parts, like let's find some really great people. And Winona was one of those folks, like she's obviously very busy, very in demand, got a lot of things going on. But to get like, Lydia essentially in our sort of horror comedy thing, I mean, it's how you cannot do better than that, frankly. And it was just, she was just so perfect in the role, so funny, so odd, so serious, so deadpan. Yeah, I don't know. I can't tell you how we did it. We went out to her and she said yes, but it was such a get. It was such a get.
And then my last question for you, obviously, there's the Eddie Murphy movie in the past, there's the Muppets Haunted Mansion. What was the challenge in kind of staying true to, the attraction as a base, but not really going over ground that's already been covered. I thought there was a good balance here.
Yeah, I mean, again, some of that is done in the screenplay, but it's also about like you got to put the blinders on. You really can't, like I of course have seen those iterations of the Haunted Mansion, and really enough to just make sure that we aren't covering the same ground. But once that's been established, you just got to put the blinders on and make the movie that's in front of you, and not really think about those things, because you can't control it anyway. How people will receive something, and you can't determine the legacy of a thing while you're making it. You just can't. I don't know how to do that. I don't know anybody that knows how to do that. And so I'm glad it had the balance, but it was achieved by just really not looking to my left or right.